Hi guys, how's it going? So I've just got this Sundown SIA-3500 amplifier in for repair. This is a brand new amplifier. This has been sent in to me under warranty. The customer states that he bought this amplifier to replace his old SAZ-3500, and he went to install this amplifier, and as soon as he connected the power wires, massive spark, a bunch of smoke from the amplifier, seems to have blown a bunch of components inside. So he contacted the distributor in the UK, got it sent straight over to me to inspect. Now I'm always a bit skeptical with these kind of faults where it just you plug it in and it just goes up in smoke, not even any remote connector or anything like that, because if this did have an internal fault, like some kind of solder bridge or something like that, it would have been picked up when it was tested in the factory. If these are tested in the factory, I'm not sure. If they're not, then obviously this may very well possibly be happening. But it's very uncommon and very rare for this to actually make its way all the way to the customer with such a fault that it blows the second you touch the power wires. So I'm going to talk you through my inspection process here and understand the conclusions that I've come to based on what I can see here. The first thing that I notice is a massive amount of arcing and kind of sparks has occurred around the ground terminal. You can see there lots of discoloration, lots of soot from sparks and arcing. The plastic is even melted there around the ground terminal. So it appears that the 12-volt connector was put in first, and then the wire was touched on the ground, and as it was touched on the ground, obviously it's like loose and it's making lots of sparks and high resistance, and lots of current is being drawn, like a huge amount of current is being drawn through that terminal when that wire was connected. Let's take a look at where the power supply MOSFETs were mounted to the heatsink. There's this rainbow discoloration here on the thermal tape that isolates the MOSFETs from the heatsink electrically, and this only occurs when these have got scorching hot. This is remnants of like massive amounts of heat on these thermal pads. You can see that over on the other side by the output section, this discoloration is not present, as these never got hot. They've never even received power yet for the customer. Literally just the second that the power wires were connected, these MOSFETs have absolutely roasted and got ridiculously hot, leaving this kind of discoloration on the tape there. Taking a look at the underside of the PCB where the power supply MOSFETs are, we can see there that there is issues with the solder on the power supply MOSFET legs, and there is also broken traces here, which is the ground trace that connects the ground of the amplifier to the main chassis, the heatsink. There is a break. There's also a break on the other side, but the solder here has, it's not looking so good. And at first I was like, wow, that's a pretty poor job from factory, but it never would have left the factory like this. What's happened is the MOSFETs have got so hot, and this leg has got so hot, that the solder has melted and dripped and kind of come out the holes there. I see this quite often, especially in amplifiers where the power supply FETs have blown as a result of an output short. So yeah, that's got really hot enough to melt the solder there right out of its hole and drip down. Here is the ground trace break on the top of the heatsink as well. And there's another ground trace break just behind this MOSFET here. It's kind of bubbled up. I'm not sure if it's actually snapped broken yet, but it's got ridiculously hot like a fuse. It started to fuse. The actual power supply MOSFETs themselves look in surprisingly good condition. Obviously, when this customer connected the power wires and saw the big sparking and sort of smoking and stuff like that, they would have removed it instantly. The only time you see power supply MOSFETs really cooked up and absolutely burned to smithereens is when the power has been connected for a long duration and these have been given a chance to get ridiculously hot and basically burn the plastic casing on these FETs. So the power wire was inserted and removed relatively quickly, but the immense inrush of current has caused these traces to fuse open. So when I saw all of these things, I asked the customer, hey, can you just tell me what exactly happened as you connected it? And he said, literally all I did was just took my SAZ-3500 out and installed this in its place. He said it was like a 10-minute job, and I've actually asked for some photos of where this is installed because I've got a bit of an inkling here as to what's actually happened. But we'll wait for a bit more information, but I'll show you why I believe I know what's happened. So this right here is the customer's old SAZ-3500, which also needed a service for other unrelated reasons. So I've got it in the workshop here. So you see the power terminals right here. So I'm just going to hold up the power terminals for the SIA-3500. Can you see the difference there? They're the other way around. The customer said that they just swapped these amps over. It was like a 10-minute job. Now, this type of failure where you just insert the power wires and it goes bang straight away with no remote, this doesn't happen. The only thing that will cause that to happen is a soldering error at the factory, which I'm not seeing any signs of. I mean, you've got the solder on the bottom of those MOSFETs there, but that's because it's melted. I can see how it's melted. I can see that the gravity has caused it to drip down onto the other legs. That's not what was there from factory. The only other thing that caused that to happen from factory is if the MOSFETs themselves were blown already before the customer received it, which I can't see. I've never ever seen that happen either. And also we saw on the heatsink that all of the power supply MOSFETs have all heated up, that there was that rainbow discoloration across all of the power supply MOSFETs. So all of those FETs have received the same issue or stress at the same time. So it's not just like one FET was dead from factory and it's, you know, plugged it in and caused this issue. All of those FETs have died and have got really, really hot at the same time. So if you hadn't guessed by now, my diagnosis on this is that it was connected in reverse polarity. Not only do we have the difference in the polarity of the terminals on the old amplifier versus the new amplifier, where this was like supposedly a quick job. I imagine that the wires were just pulled out of the other old amplifier and just put back in the same way. I've asked the customer, like without saying anything, just to see whether he says, oh yeah, and I had to flip the wires over because they were different or anything like that. And I'm getting a picture of the install to see whether it would be easy to flip the wires or whether there's just like a very short amount of wire there that it would be really difficult to flip over to kind of, you know, confirm whether that's actually really what happened and really likely to be happening. But I honestly believe, with all of my knowledge and experience in this has been connected in reverse polarity. That amount of current going through the ground, so what would have happened here is the ground wire would have been shoved into the plus 12 terminal first, and then the 12 volt wire would have been connected to the ground terminal, which explains why we've got that massive amount of current going through all of the ground traces, basically fusing a bunch of them open and hitting all of the power supply MOSFETs equally at the same time. The current is finding its way backwards through these FETs, through the ground traces, and back to the terminal here in the wrong way around. The only thing that we don't see is these power supply capacitors having any bulging, which you usually would see if the amplifier's been connected in reverse polarity. Those capacitors, obviously they've had the voltage connected backwards across them. Now these capacitors are rated for 25 volts, so they would have got about half of their rated voltage backwards through them. But where it was just for such a fraction of a second, literally, you can see there the sparks on the terminal, that wire was just kind of like shoved in there and whoa, then shoved back out again. I don't think it was enough time to actually let these capacitors kind of heat up inside and boil and vent and bulge and stuff like that. So that instant current draw has literally just gone straight through the tray, straight through the FETs, caused them to heat up like crazy and back out the terminal. So once I've got a bit more information from the customer that really solidifies my idea here as to what happened, I'm obviously going to let the UK distributor know what I found, and then he's down to him whether he wants to still cover the repair under warranty or whether it's going to be the customer that covers this repair. But I just thought it'd be interesting to show you guys kind of what things to look out for, my sort of thought process through looking at this amplifier, and what all of the telltale signs mean, and you know, things that I'm seeing and trying to piece together an exact order of how things happened and what the actual cause of this failure was. Because it is very, very rare. You don't get amplifiers that just fail for no reason without even being powered up the second the power wires are connected. That's either going to be reverse polarity or a manufacturing issue with soldering, or the only other time that can happen is if some stray piece of wire strand from like the power terminals, when you're hooking the amplifier up, if a bit of your wire like snaps off, you know, little strand of cable, little copper thing, gets in the amplifier through one of these vents, one of these gaps, and then sits across the MOSFET legs. That can also cause this to happen when you just insert the power wires, but that would cause different kinds of damage. It wouldn't be equal across all FETs, and we'd usually see some remnants of that wire or some big sparking and arcing in one specific location, which we're not actually seeing here. So yeah, just a short little video, but I wanted to show you guys that, and hopefully it was interesting. Have a great day.